In today's class, we'll discuss about what? Introduction to Power Apps. Now, before going to start discussing about Power Apps, first of all, let me go to the Power Platform architecture. So, if you go to the Power Platform architecture, we know that in this Power Platform architecture, if you want to go and work with Power Apps, go and use which software? Power Apps software. Now, what we are going to understand now in today's class is, let me give it a high level. In today's class, we'll try to understand what is Power Apps, and then we'll go and discuss about how to go and create an app in the Power Apps software. Once after creating an app from the Power Apps, how to submit the data to what? Data sources. So what is the data source we are going to discuss in today's class is Sharepoint. We'll go and take one of the data sources as what? Sharepoint. So from the Power Apps, once after creating an app, how to submit the data to the data, one of the data source called Sharepoint we'll discuss. And then once after submitting the data to the data sources, now whatever the data I'm having in the SharePoint, I want to go and display that data again in the Power Apps. Once after displaying that data again in the Power Apps, next I need to go and work with the data. This is what we need to understand now in today's class. In today's class, we'll try to understand what is Power Apps, how to go and create an app. Once after creating an app in Power Apps, we'll understand how to submit the data to the data source. So one of the data source is what? SharePoint. Once after submitting the data to the data sources, whatever the data I'm having in the SharePoint, I want to submit that data again in where? Sorry, I want to display that data again in where? Power Apps. Once after displaying the data, next I need to go and work with the data. So this is what we'll go and discuss now in today's class practically. So before going to understand how to go and create an app in the Power Apps, first of all, we need to have some knowledge on what? Data sources. So first let me go and discuss about one of the data source called what? SharePoint. So in today's class, first we'll go and discuss about what's meant by SharePoint. Once after understanding about SharePoint, and then we'll go and discuss about what is Power Apps, and then how to create an app from Power Apps, how to submit the data to SharePoint, and then how to display the data again in the Power Apps. Once after displaying the data, how to work with the data we'll discuss. So first let me start with one of the data source, SharePoint, guys. So let me go and keep here. In today's class, first we'll try to understand what is meant by SharePoint. So let me keep here what is the definition of SharePoint, guys. SharePoint is a cloud-based. SharePoint is a cloud-based data source software which is used to store and manage the organizational business data in the form of list or in the form of documents at one place. This is what the definition of SharePoint. Try to understand what is meant by SharePoint is SharePoint is a cloud-based data source software which is used for what? To store and manage the organizational business data in the form of what? List. List is nothing but a table. What is meant by list means? List is nothing but a table. So in the SharePoint terminology, tables are called as what? List. In the SharePoint terminology, tables are called as list. So most of the times we'll store the business data in the form of tables only. That means in the form of list. So there are some cases where we'll go and store the data in the form of documents also. Documents like what? Documents like we'll store some data in the form of Excel files. We'll store some data in the form of Word document. We'll go and store some data in the form of CSV files. We'll store some data in the form of PPT. So there are some cases where we'll go and store that data in the form of documents also. So everything where we can store the data in the form of list or in the form of documents means at one place in the SharePoint. So this is what the definition of SharePoint is. Then high level, what the SharePoint? SharePoint is a cloud-based data source software which is used to store and manage what? Organizational business data in the form of list is nothing but a table, or in the form of documents like Excel, Word, PPT or CSV, everything at one place. So this is what the definition of SharePoint. And now I'm telling that SharePoint is what software? Data source software. I'm telling that SharePoint is a data source to store the data. Now what's meant by data source? Already we understand about what's meant by data source in the previous class. Already we know that what's meant by data sources. When I'm discussing about the 4-step business application process, here I discussed about, correct, here I discussed about what? Data sources. As we know that what's meant by data sources means the place where the companies will store their business data is known as what? Data sources. So already we know that what's meant by data sources. The place where the companies will store their business data is known as data sources. So what is the data source we are discussing in our classes? SharePoint. So SharePoint will act as one of the data source software which is used to store the business data. Fine. Now next point we need to understand how to go and store the data in the SharePoint now. So we understand what's the definition of SharePoint, what's meant by data source. Now how to store the data. So if you want to store the data in the SharePoint, first of all, we need to go and open the SharePoint now. So if you want to open the SharePoint now, how to open it? The next point, understand how to open what? SharePoint. Now in order to go and open the SharePoint, we need to go and use one web URL. So what's that web URL? We need to go and use it here is office.com. We need to go with one web URL called what? Office.com. Now in order to go and open the SharePoint, you can go to the Chrome or you can go to any one of the web browser, either Microsoft Edge, any one web browser. Let me go to the Chrome now. Go to the Chrome, go to the search bar. In the search bar, go and search for what? Office.com. Go and search for what? Office.com. Click on the enter button. Enter the URL office.com. Click on enter button. And now it is asking us to sign in. It is asking us to sign in here. So you need to sign in with organizational accounts, guys, not your Gmail account, not your Outlook account. We need to go with the organizational accounts here. So let me click on what? Switch to a different account. When I click on it, it is asking us to pass what? URL. That means an email address. Let me take the email address from here itself. Let me go to the office.com. Let me copy it from here to here. Go and click on switch to a different account. Let me take the credentials as Anil Kumar @ny60. This is the email ID. Now once after entering the email, click on what? Sign in. When I click on sign in, it is asking us to pass what? Password. Let me enter the password. Let me enter what? Password. Once after entering the password, go and click on what? Sign in. When I click on sign in, now it is going to log into what? Office.com. What is the URL? Office.com. Now once if I log in, so it will navigate you to where? Welcome to Microsoft 365. So you are logging to the Microsoft 365 account. So now from here, you are able to access all the Microsoft 365 applications. Every Microsoft application you are able to access from here. So now my requirement, I want to go and open what? SharePoint. SharePoint is also developed by the Microsoft company only. So from here, how to open the SharePoint is go to the search bar and then go and search for what? SharePoint. When you search for the SharePoint, you are able to see what? SharePoint application. Just go and click on it. When I click on it, it will go and open what? It will go and open the SharePoint. It's asking us permission, switch to a different account. Let me sign in with Anil Kumar. Fine. Now I'm opening what here? SharePoint. So to open the SharePoint, log into the office.com, go to the search bar and search for SharePoint and click on SharePoint. When I click on it, it will open what? SharePoint. This is the UI for SharePoint, guys. Now once after logging to the SharePoint, please go and check the credentials, what credentials you are using. Sometimes by default, it will take your Outlook or Gmail credentials, guys. Make sure whatever the credentials you are using, it must and should be an organizational account. Once after logging to the SharePoint, so now within the SharePoint, my requirement is what? I want to store the data. To store the data within the SharePoint, we need to go and create something called what? Site. Now, what is meant by a site in the SharePoint? Let me go and keep here. The next point we need to understand what is meant by a site. So now try to understand. Site is a database. Site acts as a database or a container which is used to store and manage organizational business data. So what's meant by site? Site will act as what? Database. Oracle acts as what? Container, which is used for what? Store and manage the organizational business data. So within the SharePoint, where we need to go and store and manage the organizational business data means within the site. So for now, let me go and create a site, guys. First, keep in mind site will act as one database. Let me go and create a site now. Go to the SharePoint. Go and click on what? Create a site. Now let me go and create one site here. Create a site. Let me click on create site. When I click on create site, now it is going to open one new window. It is telling us what? Create a site. And then it is telling us what? Select the site type. Here we'll have the two types of sites. One is team site. Second is what? Communication site. Now what is meant by team site and communication site? When to go and use what? First, let me go and keep here. Under the site, whenever you are creating the site, there are types of sites. There are two types of sites are available. What are the two types of sites? Correct. One is team site. Second one is communication site. One is team site and second is what? Communication site. Now, what is meant by team site? What is meant by communication site? When to go and get the team site? When to go and get the communication site? And what's the difference between them? I'll discuss this in the coming classes, guys. As today is the introduction class, not able to go in depth. So for now, just try to understand we have the two types of sites. Now when to go and create what and what's the difference between them, you'll understand them in the coming classes. Anyway, I'll discuss about in detail in the coming class. So for now, I'll go and create what site here is. I'll go and create a team site. I'll go and select what site? Team site. Let me select the team site now. I'm selecting the team site here, and then it is showing some templates. Go and select the standard template from here. Select what? Standard. When I select the standard template, it will show the preview of the template. Now just go and click on what? Use the template. When I click on use this template, now it is asking us to pass what? Site name. It is telling us give your site name. Let me pass the site name as batch 122 8 p.m. Your batch number is 122. Batch 122 8 p.m. is the site name. I'm passing your batch number as a site name. Once after passing the site name, just go and click on what? Next. When I click on the next button, don't do any changes here also. There are some privacy settings is there. Two types of private settings, public and private. When to go and use what? You'll be understanding in the coming classes. I'll discuss. For now, just go and click on what? Create. When I click on create site, now it is creating a site for us. You can see it is creating a site. Once the site is created, you can see the finish button is enabled. Now the finish button is grayed out. It is disabled. Now the finish button is enabled. That means the site is created successfully. Now go and click on what? Finish. When I click on finish, now it is going to open what? The site. So what is the site we created? Batch 122 8 p.m. is the site name. Now once after creating the site, next within the site we need to go and store what? Data in the form of what? List or in the form of sometimes documents also. Now I want to go and create a list to store the data within the once after opening the site, once after creating the site, within this site I want to go and create what? List. To create a list, go to the tab called what? New. Here in this tab there is an option called what? List. Now before going to start creating a list from here, let me go and keep what's meant by a list in the SharePoint. Let me go and keep here what's meant by a list in the SharePoint. Now try to understand in general what is the definition of site is. It is used to store the data in the form of columns and rows. If you are storing something in the form of columns and rows, then we'll call it as what? Table. So this is what the general meaning of a list. List is used to store that data in the form of columns and rows. If you are storing something in the form of columns and rows, we'll call it as what? Table in general. But tables are called as what in the SharePoint terminology? List. Tables are called as what? List. So this is what the general meaning of a list, guys. Now what is meant by list in the SharePoint terminology? What the list contains? Let me keep here. In the SharePoint terminology, the list will contains the list will contains list items, or let me keep the list will contains the fields comma list items. In the SharePoint terminology, what the list contains? The list will contains the fields comma list items. Fields are nothing but what? Fields are nothing but the columns, guys. Fields are nothing but what? Columns. Sometimes columns are also called as attributes. In some software terminology, columns are also called as what? Attributes. So in the SharePoint terminology, what is meant by list means list will contains the fields comma list items. Fields are nothing but columns. List items are nothing but what? Rows. Correct. List items are nothing but rows. So this is what the list, what is meant by list in SharePoint. This is what is meant by list in general. So now we know that what's meant by a list. Next, I want to create a list here. So what is that list name is? I want to keep the list name as students. I want to get one list here called what? Students. So in this list, what columns I want to keep? Let me go and keep the column names as student name column, student email ID column, student mobile number column, student course, and then education background, qualification, education qualification of that student. So these are the columns. Columns are called as what? Fields. In the SharePoint terminology, columns are called as what? Fields. So I want to create a list called students. In this list, these are the fields I want to keep. That means columns. Now let me go and create a list called what now? Students. We know that what's meant by a list. Let me go and create a list now. So to create a list, go to what? SharePoint. In the SharePoint, first go to what? Site. And then go and click on what? New. When I click on new, it will show what? List. Let me select the list. When I select the list, now you can see it is telling us what? Create a list. So there are different ways you can create the list: from the blank, from an existing list, from an Excel, from a CSV. You can create the list from different places. So for now, I'll go and show you how to create a list from the blank. In the coming classes, we'll discuss about how to create a list from an existing list, from an Excel, and from a CSV. So let me go and click on what? Blank list. When I click on blank list, it is asking us to pass the list name. Let me pass the list name as what? Students. And then click on what? Create. And I click on create. Now it is going to create a list for us. You can see that list name here in the left navigation. What's that list name? Students. Whenever if you create a list in the SharePoint, by default, SharePoint will go and add one default column, guys. Whenever if you create a list in the SharePoint, SharePoint itself will add one default column. What's that column name? Title column. So this is the default column it will create whenever if you create a site. I'll rename this column name, guys. I'll show you how to rename this column name to student name. I'll make it as a first column as student name. Next, I want to add what? Email, mobile, course, education. Let me add these columns now. To add the columns, there is an option called what? Add columns. Click on it. Click on the next button. Let me pass the column name as what? Email. Select the data type as what? There are different types of data types is there. Single line of text, multiple line, number, yes or no, person, date and time, choice, hyperlink, currency. Different data types will be there. So let me select the single line of text as it is in email. And then click on what? Save. It is adding one column called what? Email. Let me go and add another column. Add column. Click on next. Mobile number. Now that type is single line of text. Let me take this as single line. Click on what? Save. It's adding one more column called mobile. Let me add one more column. Again, go and click on what? Add columns. The next column I want to add what? Course. For which course the student is inquiring. So let me keep the column name as course. Next data type is choice. I'm going to take the data type as what? Choices. Let me enter the choices here now. Let me enter the first course as Power Apps. The second course I'm going to keep here is what? Power BI. And next, let's take, I'm keeping the another course as SQL Server. Let's take, these are the three courses I'm mentioning. So you can add more choices. You can add, click on what? Add new choice. It allows to add the more number of choices. So I'm keeping only 3 choice values here. And then go and click on what? Save. When I click on save, it is adding one new column called choice column. That is course. Next, I want to add another one more column, education. Let me keep the data as single line of text itself. Click on save. So now these are the columns I'm adding. Now there is one column called title column. I want to rename it what? S name. How to rename it? This column means go to the settings. There is an option here called what? Settings. Go to the settings. There is an option called what? List settings. Go to the list settings. And then here, these are the settings of which list? Students. When I scroll down, there is a section called columns. Here you can see the columns. There is a column called what? Title. Let me select the column. When I select that column, it will allow us to edit that column. Edit column. Let me change it to what? S name. Click on what? Okay. When I click on OK, now it is changing that column name to what? S name. Once after change the column name, now go to the list. Select the list name students. And now see, this is what the columns I'm adding to the list. List name is students. In this list, these are the columns I'm having. Columns are also called as what? Fields. Now, once after creating a list, my requirement what? I want to enter the data. So if you want to enter the data, you can go and click on what? Add new item. When I click on add new item, it will allow us to enter the data. Let's take the student name as Warner. Let me keep here. Let me take with Sunil. Let me enter the email ID. Just some random numbers I'm entering. Let me take the mobile number. Select the course as Power Apps, education background as BTech, and then go and click on what? Save. Once after entering the data, go and click on what? Save. When I click on save, now see automatically that record is created. Now we know that what is meant by SharePoint. We know that what's meant by a site. We know that what's meant by a list. We know that how to create a list. We know that how to add the data into the list. Now my requirement, I don't want to enter the data into the list manually. I don't want to enter the data into the SharePoint list manually. I want to enter the data into the SharePoint list from Power Apps. Here I'm entering the data into the SharePoint list with the help of add new item. I don't want to add it from here. My requirement now, I want to enter the data into the SharePoint list from Power Apps. So now my requirement, I want to go and create an app in the Power Apps. I want to go and create an app in the Power Apps. From Power Apps, I want to submit the data to the SharePoint list. Now how to do it? So once after understanding about SharePoint, in the SharePoint we understand what's meant by SharePoint, what's meant by a site, and what's meant by a list. Now let me go to the Power Apps. Now we'll try to understand what is Power Apps, how to create an app in the Power Apps, and how to submit that data to the SharePoint as a data source. Let me go and keep here. Now we'll try to understand what is Power Apps. Now try to understand, guys. In general, what is the definition of Power Apps? If you ask anyone what is Power Apps means, simply they will give an answer. What is that? Power Apps is used to create apps. It's what we know already. In the previous class, when I am discussing about the introduction class, they are already discussed about what is Power Apps. In simple words, we can say Power Apps is used to create what? Apps or the forms within the Power Platform. Within the Power Platform, if you want to go and create the apps or forms, we'll go and use Power Apps. This is what at a high level what the Power Apps. But what is the actual definition of Power Apps? What the Power Apps can do? Let me keep here, guys. So if you ask anyone what is Power Apps, they will give this answer. But we need to understand what the Power Apps can do actually. As we know that Power Apps is used to create the apps or forms which is used to collect the data, from the customers comma, once after collecting the data from the customers, comma, it will submit the data, submits the data to what? Submits the data to the, submits the data, correct, submits the data to the data source, whatever the data source it is. Here I'm taking it as SharePoint. You need to keep it as a data source. Submits the data to the data sources, comma. Once after submitting the data, it is also used for what? Display the data that is stored in the data sources. Once after displaying the data, and also use it to work with the data that is stored in the data sources. This is what the definition of Power Apps, what the Power Apps can do. Try to understand. As we know that Power Apps is used to create the apps or the forms, which is used for collect the data from the customers. Once after collecting the data from the customers, we need to submit the data to what? Data source. Once after submitting the data, again we are able to display the data in the Power Apps. Once after displaying the data, we'll go and work with the data. So first point, it is used to create the app or a form. Second point, it is used to collect the data from the customers. And third point, it is for to submit the data to the data sources. Once after submitting the data, we are able to display the data, and finally we are going to work with the data. So this is what we can do with the help of Power Apps. So as I said that if you go to the block diagram, Power Apps is used to create the app, which is used to collect the data from whom? Customers. Once after entering the data in the Power App or in the form, we need to submit the data to what? Data source. What is the data source? SharePoint is our data source. Once after submitting the data to the data sources, whatever the data is there in the data source, I want to display that data again in where? Power Apps. Once after displaying the data, I need to go and work with the data in the Power Apps. This is what the Power Apps can do. That's what the same points I'm mentioning here also. That's what I'm keeping here. And, and now let me go and discuss how to create an app in the Power Apps, how to collect the data from the customers, how to submit the data, how to display the data, and then how to work with the data. Let me discuss it practically now. So in order to go on to create the app, first of all, we need to open it. Now how to open the Power Apps? How to open what? Power Apps. If you want to open the Power Apps, there are two ways. One is you can open it from the office.com. Second one, if you want to open the Power Apps directly, go and use the URL make.powerapps.com. So these are the two ways. Let me show you both the ways. First, let me show you from the office.com. Let me go to the office.com. In the office.com, go to the search bar. First, go to what? Office.com. From here, go and search for what? Power Apps. When I search for Power Apps, you are able to see what? Power Apps app or application. Just go and click on it. When I click on it, it will go and open what? Power Apps software. It will go and open what? Power Apps. This is what the Power Apps software. This is the UI. This is the one way. Let me close this tab. What is another way to open the Power Apps? Directly go and use the URL make.powerapps.com. Go to the new tab. Go to the new tab and then enter that URL make.powerapps.com. Go with this URL make.powerapps.com. Just click on the enter button. When I click on the enter button, now it will directly open what? Power Apps software. So this is the welcome UI or welcome page for Power Apps, guys. Once after login to the Power Apps, make sure the credentials. It must and should be what? Organizational. Sometimes by default it will take your Gmail or Outlook credentials, guys. Why? Because you already log into your laptop with your Gmail or Outlook. Please check your credentials here. Now once after login to the Power Apps, now from here I want to go and create what? Apps. Now in order to go and create the apps, let me go to which tab? Create tab. There is a tab called create. Go to the create tab. So from here you can create what? Apps. Create your app from here. So let me go and set what? Create the app from the blank. From the scratch I want to create. So create an app from the scratch and then add your data. Let me select this one. From the blank, I will show you how to create an app. And then here there are different apps you can create, guys. One is Canvas, second is model driven apps. Now, what is meant by Canvas? What is meant by model driven apps? When to use the Canvas, when to go and use the model driven apps? What is the difference between them? I'll discuss in the coming classes. So for now in our classes, for now we'll go with what? Canvas apps. Let me go and click on what? Create. I want to create a Canvas app now. Let me go and click on create here. When I click on create, now it is asking us to pass the app name. Let me pass the app name as AB trainings. I will show you how to create an app for AB trainings case. AB trainings batch 122 is the app name. Just for understanding purpose, I'm keeping the app name like this. You can keep your own names, guys. Once after passing the app name, let me keep here AB capital. Once after passing the app name, now you can create the app for two formats. One is tablet, second is what? Phone. Now let me go with the phone for today. Anyway, we'll discuss about tablet format also in the coming classes. Now, anyway, the format, only the UI format is different, guys. Tablet and mobile layout is different. The designing part, technical point, everything is same. Only the format will change, UI will change. Now select the phone, click on what? Create. When I click on create, now it is going to open what? Power Apps Studio. Welcome to Power Apps Studio. Power Apps Studio is the place where we will go and create or design the app based on the client requirement. Whenever if you want to create the apps based on your client requirement, you need to go to what? Power Apps Studio. Now just go and click on skip. Skip. This is the Power Apps user interface UI. Power Apps Studio user interface. So in this Power Apps Studio user interface, there are different sections will be there, guys. So what is the UI for Power Apps? I will discuss about UI in the coming classes for 1 hour. Once if you are familiar with the UI, then you can create the apps very easily. So anyway, I'll discuss in the coming classes what is the complete UI for Power Apps for 1 hour in the coming classes. For now, just try to understand how to create an app now. So the place where we will create the app is in the within the Power App Studio. This is the place. This one we'll call it as Canvas. This one we'll call it as what? Canvas pane, or we'll call it as a screen. We'll call it as what? Screens. So either we call it as a screen or we'll call it as canvas. Now canvas is the place where we will go and design or create the apps based on the client requirement. So now I'm going to create an app for AB trainings. This is the app name. I'm going to create an app for what? AB trainings. For our institute itself, I'll show you how to create one simple app to collect the student information. So first of all, this is my canvas or a screen pane or screen. You can see that name here. What's the screen name? Screen 1. Now first my requirement, I want to do some formattings here. I want to make this screen as a welcome screen. By default, the background color is white. Let me change it to red. To change the background color, there is a tab called what? Properties tab. Go to the property. There is a property called fill property. Go to the fill property. Let me change the color to red. I'm changing the background color to what? Red. Once after change the background color to red, next my requirement, as it is a welcome page, I want to go and add the logo. AB trainings logo. To add the logo, you can add it from here. Background images. If you add the logo from here itself, it doesn't look good. Anyway, I will show you how it doesn't look good in the coming classes. For now, to add the image, go to the insert tab. Under the insert tab, we'll have the different controls. All these are the different controls, guys. By using these controls only, we are going to design the app here. While designing the app, you need to use what? Controls. So now I'll go and search for one of the control called what? Image control. There is one control called what? Image. Let me select this control image. When I select this, it will add to the screen. So you can drag and drop. You don't want to write any line of code here to create an image. Just drag and drop wherever you want to keep. Let me keep it here on the top and increase the height and width. This is what the image I'm adding. Now by default is not showing any image. Now I want to go and show an image here. To display the images, there is a property called what? Image property. By default is none. Click on the drop down, go and click on what? Upload an image. Go and click on upload one image. Let me upload the image from my local system. So there is an image AB trainings logo. Let it open. Select the image, click on open. When I click on open, now it is adding that image here. Now let me keep the fill position, keep it in the fill position. So this is what the AB trainings logo. Welcome screen, I'm keeping the logo. And then AB is for what? Analytics benchmark is for trainings. Analytics benchmark is for training. So let me keep some text here, trainings, AB trainings. So now to keep the text here, trainings, again I need to go and add what? Go to the insert tab, add one control. Let me add the text label. Let me add one control called text label. Keep this, just select this, it will add to the screen. Just drag and drop wherever if you want to keep. No need to write the code. Just drag and drop. And then let me do some formatting sketch. Go and change the font weight to semi bold. Increase the font size to 35 and align it to center. And then change the font color to red, white. Change the font color to what? White. And by default is showing the value as what? Text. I want to change it to what? Trainings. Select this, go to the property called what? Text property. Select the text property and then go and change it from here. Let me change the text to what? Trainings. Now to understand a better way, let me keep some spacing between the letters. I'll keep some spacing now. Let me keep some spacing between the letters. And now see, this is how it's look like. AB trainings. This is the first screen. Now save. There is an option called save option. Click on save. Save it, and then there is an option called preview. Play button. Preview or play. When I play, this is how it's look like. This is how the app will look like. So now I'm adding one logo and I'm keeping some text as AB trainings. Next, I want to go and keep one button here called get started. Let's take, I want to keep one button called get started. So let me go and add one text label, guys. Let me add the text label right now. Let me add the text label, keep the text label here. And let me go and keep some formattings. Keep it in the semi bold, increase the font size to 30, and then align it to center. Let me go to the fill color, keep the fill color, font color to black itself. Go to the background color and let me change it to yellow. So just I'm doing some formattings here. And also let me go and increase the height to 80. Fine. Now let me go and change the text. I want to change the text to what? Get started. Select the text label. Go to the property called what? Text property. Let me change the text to what? Get started. Increase the font size to 35. Little bit. Let me go and increase the height to 90. Fine. This is how it's look like. Fine. I'm adding another one more text label. Get started. Now next my requirement. This is my screen one. Now whenever I go and click on the get started, it need to go and open one form like structure where I need to enter the student details. Let's say I want to create one form like structure like student name, student email ID, student mobile number, student course, student education background. These are the fields I want to keep. So let me design one form like structure. Like this, I want to go and create one form. This is the form I'm creating. So now when I want to go and open this form, whenever I click on the get started, it need to open one form like structure. Once after entering the data, I'll enter the data here. Once after entering the data, student name, email ID, mobile number, course and education, I need to submit the data to what? Data sources. To submit the data, I need to keep one button called what? Submit button. So once after entering the data, when I click on the submit button, when I click on what? The submit button, whatever the data I'm entering in the form, this data need to submit to what? Data source. What is our data source? Sharepoint. So this is what my requirement now. This is what the agenda of for today's class. Now, how to go and create one form like structure? How to click on the submit button? How to submit the data to data source from Power Apps? So first I need to create one form, right? So to create the form, I'm having only one screen. I want to create another screen now. So there is an option called what here? New screen. Go to the new screen. Let me add one blank screen here. Let me select the blank screen. This is the screen 2. Now the screen color is white. Let me change it to what? Red. Let me change the screen color to what? Red. Once after change the screen color, let me keep some text here. I want to create one form. This form is for what? Whenever the new student is inquiring any course, that student details I want to enter here. So let me keep the header as what? New student inquiry form. Let me keep the header as what? New student inquiry form. Let me go to the insert tab, add one text label. Keep the text label here. And then let me keep it in semi bold. Increase the font size to 35. Align it to center. Change the font color to white. Let me change the text to what? New student registration. Correct. Sorry, new student inquiry, right? New student inquiry form. So this is what the text I want to display. Let me reduce the size to 32. Fine, it looks good. New student inquiry form. This is the header. Now for this header I want to keep some border. Let me add some border. Select the text label. There is one property called what? Border property. Let me go and keep the border thickness to 5. And now the border color is dark blue. Let me change the border color also. There is a color property. Let me change the color to white. So now see, it is I'm keeping some text and I'm keeping some border. Now let me go and add one form. I want to create one form. To create a form, go to which tab? Insert tab. Go and add what control? Form control. Edit form control. Let me add it. Once if I add, adjust this form to the screen. Let me go and increase the height and width property. So this is the form I'm adding. Now see, by default, whenever if you add the form, so you can see here, it is telling that this form is not connected to any data. So first of all, we need to connect this form to the data source. What is our data source? This form I want to connect to what? Sharepoint list. What's the list name? Students. So now from Power Apps, I want to connect to the SharePoint list. How to connect? From the Power Apps, I want to connect to the SharePoint list. So if you want to connect to the data sources from the SharePoint, from the Power Apps, there is a tab called what? Data tab. This is the tab called Data tab. Go to the Data tab. And then there is an option called what? Add data. Go and click on Add data. And then go and search for what? First data source. What's our data source? SharePoint. Go and search for SharePoint. You can see at what here? SharePoint data source. Let me select this. Select this. And you can see here the site name. What is the site? Batch 11 to 8 p.m. If you are not able to see the site here, how to collect the site address? We need to enter the site address here. To collect the site address, go to the SharePoint, open the site, and then go to the URL. From in the URL, copy up to the site name. Copy the URL up to what? Site name. Copy up to site name and enter that URL here. If you enter that URL, when I click on connect, automatically it will connect to that site. And then it will show us what? Students is the list name. Let me select the list name students and click on what? Connect. When I click on connect, it is connecting to what? Students list in the SharePoint. You can see that data source here, SharePoint, list name is students. Once after connecting to the data source, now go to the form, select the form. This form will have one property called what? Data source. By default is not connected to any data. Let me connect to the data source as what? Students. Let me select the data source as student. Now whenever I select the data source as student, by default, based on the columns in the SharePoint list, based on what columns in the SharePoint, Power Apps itself will go and create one form like structure. If you say I'm creating this form means no, just I'm connecting to the data source. Automatically it is creating one form. You don't want to create the forms also here. Power Apps will take care of it. So it is creating one form like structure, student name, email, mobile, course, education, and there is one default column called attachments. So first my requirement, I want to go and increase the font weight, font size for this data code. This one will call it as a title. This is the place where we can enter the values. So we basically in the Power Apps terminology, we'll call it as data code key. We'll call data code key. We'll call it as data code value. Anyway, we'll understand that terminology. You'll understand in the coming classes. But for now, let me go and change the font weight, font size. Let me select the student name. Go and keep it in semi bold. Increase the font size to 24. Or let me keep it as 28. And let me change the font color to white. Let me select this value. where we can enter the values. Font size to 28. Let me select the email, semi bold. Do the same formatting guys. Do the same formattings for the remaining all. Let me do the same formattings. Select the course. Education finally. Fine. Now there is one default column called attachment. Let me remove this column guys. How to remove this column is select the form. Select the form. Form will have one property called fields. Go to the fields. You can see the attachments here. Just go and click on more actions. Click on remove. When I click on remove, automatically it will remove that field here. So this is the form I am adding. This is the form I am creating. Now let me reduce the width of this form somewhat. Let me reduce some width to differentiate. Let me keep some border now. Let me go to the select the form. Form will have one property called border property. Keep the border thickness to 5. Let me change the border color to white. So this is the form I am creating. And next, once after creating the form, I'll enter the data. Once after entering the data, to submit this data to the data sources, let me go and add one button, submit button. So let me go to the insert tab. Let me go and add what control? Button. There is a control called button. Just add it. Drag and drop. Drag and drop it here. Just reduce some size. Keep the button here. Let me change the button text to what? Go to the property called text property. Change the button text to submit. And then increase the font size to 30. Let me go and change the font color to red. Let me go and change the background color to white. So now it looks somewhat better. So this is the button I am adding guys. Let me go to the height property. Let me keep it as 80. Let me increase the font size to 35. Fine. So this is the button I am adding. Now when I click on this button, it needs to submit the data. So now before that, when I go on play, when I go and save it and then play, I am not able to see the form here. I'm not able to see the form. Why? Because by default, whenever if you add one form, whenever if you go and add one form, so this form will have one property called mode property. Now what is the default mode of the form is? By default, it is edit mode. So there are three modes of forms will be there. You can use this form in three ways. One is new form, edit form, and then view form. You can use the form in three ways. So whenever if you want to enter the data, new data, form mode has to be new. If you want to edit the data, form mode has to be edit. If you want to just view the data, form mode has to be view. You'll understand when to make the form mode has to be new, when to make the form mode as edit, when to make the form mode as view in the coming classes. All this comes under customizations. We need to do some customizations there. So for now, just try to understand there are three types of modes will be there. So for now, to enter the data, we need to make the form mode to what? New. By default is edit. But here my requirement, I want to enter the data. To enter the data, form has to be new. So let me select the form, go and change the mode property from default to what? New. When I save and then play, you can see the form now. Now you can enter the data. Now before going to enter the data, so I'm having how many screens here? Two screens. Now in the screen one, whenever I click on the get started, I want to go on navigate from screen one to which screen? Screen two. Now see, when I go and play, when I click on the get started, it is going to the screen two? No. Why it is not going to the screen two means because what control it is? It is a label, text label. Text labels are just to display the value. It is used to display some value, not able to perform any action. Here I want to take some action. Whenever I click on this button, What action need to take? It need to go to the screen 2. Now, so if you want to perform any actions, text labels are not preferred. In place of text, we need to go and use what? Buttons. So let me remove this control, go to the label, let me delete this, delete it. Let me go to the insert tab, add what? Button. Let me add the button, drag and drop it here. Let me change the button text first. Let me add one button, go here. Let me change the button text to what? Get started. Increase the font size to 35. Font color to black. Background color to yellow. Fine. This is how it's look like. Just increase the width. Increase the width. Fine. Now this is the button I am adding is. Now when I save and then play, now also even though it is a button, now see when I hover the mouse there is a hand raise. That means it is a button. Now you are able to perform actions. But previously when I hover the mouse, there is no hand raise. Why? Because it's a label. So now it is a button. When I hover the mouse, there is a hand raise will be there. That means we are able to perform some actions. Now try to understand. When I click on this button, I am clicking on it. It is going to the screen too? No. Why? Because just I am adding one button. Now you need to tell to the Power Apps on select of this button. Whenever I click on this button, what action you need to take? I want to navigate from screen 1 to screen 2. So you need to tell to the Power Apps clearly, whenever I click on this button, navigate to screen 2. So select the button. This button will have one property here. Here also you can see the properties. There is a property called on select property. You can see one property here called what? On select. Select the property. By default on select, what is happening? False. That means it doesn't perform any action. So now just remove it. Whenever I select this on select of the button, I want to navigate to screen 2. So to navigate from one screen to another screen, there is one function here in the Power Apps. What that function is? Navigate. So once after you pass in the function name, navigate, open brackets. Now you need to navigate to which screen? Screen 2. Pass the screen name. Just close it. Now whenever I click on this button, get started, on select of the button, what is happening? It is navigating to the screen 2. Now before going to navigate to the screen 2, what's my requirement here is? In the screen 2 I am having one form. Before going to navigate, first I want to reset that form. If there is some data, first clear that data in the form. First reset the form. Reset form means it is used to remove the data. If there is some data in that form, it will clear that data. It will reset that form. First I want to reset. What I want to reset? Form. Pass the form name. What's the name of this form? Form 1. So reset form 1. Pass the form name. And then semicolon. Next, once after resetting the form, I want to enter the data, right? To enter the data, I want to make the form as a new form. So there is another one more function called what? New form function. So which form I want to make it as new? Form 1. Just pass the form name and semicolon. So now on select of this button, what actions it will take? First it will reset the form, and then it is going to make the form as a new, because I want to enter the new data, and then navigate to screen 2. So now save it and then play. When I click on get started, previously it's not navigating. When I click on it, it is navigating to which screen? Screen 2. That is form screen. So here the header is what? New student inquiry form. This form is for what? Whenever new student is inquired, I want to enter that student details here. Let me enter the data. Let's take the student name is Warner. Let me keep the mail ID. @gmail.com. Just I'm entering some random numbers, guys. Don't think of it. I'm entering mobile number, and then I'm going to enter the course. Click on the drop down. Let me select the course as Power BI. Education background. Let me take BTech. Now I'm entering I'm entering some data. Now whatever the data I'm entering in this form, I want to submit this data to what? Data source. What's my data source? Sharepoint. In the Sharepoint, what's the list name? Students is the list name. Now to submit the data to the Sharepoint as our data source, go and click on what? Submit. Now see, when I click on the submit button, it is submitting the data. No. If you go and check in the data source also, When I click on refresh, it is not submitting. Warner, it is the Warner. It is not there in the data source. Why? Because correct. No action I'm taking. Just I'm adding one button. I'm keeping the button name as submit. That means that it will go and submit the data. So we need to tell to the Power Apps, whenever I click on the button submit button, what action it need to take. So select the button submit, go to the property called what? On select. There is a property called what? On select of the button. So whenever I select the button, what actions it need to take? Let me select the button. Let me select the property called what? On select. By default is false. But what I want to do, I want to submit that data in the form to data sources. Now to submit the data, there is one function called what? Submit form. There is a function called what? Submit form. Which form I want to submit? Form 1. Just pass the name of that form. Now whenever I go and play, when I click on this button, now what happens? On select of the button, what is the logic I'm writing? Submit the form to the data source. Submit form 1. Now once after submitting the form, next my requirement here, before going to click on submit button, one more requirement. Once the form is submitted, I want to navigate the user to the success screen. I want to go and display one success message or a screen. So let me add one success screen also, guys. I'm handed two screens here. Let me add another screen. Let me go to the new screen. There is another one template will be there, success screen template. Let me just add it. You can create the success screen by your own, or you can, if there is any template, just use the template. Let me select the template, screen 3. So it is what? Success screen. This was completed successfully. By default is showing some message, what? Some tick mark. This was completed successfully. So I want to navigate the user to the screen. So when I want to navigate, whenever the user click on the submit button, first submit the data. First submit what? Data, and then navigate the user to which screen? Screen 3. So whenever I click on the submit button, it will take two actions. First submit the form and then navigate to the success screen. So now these are the three screens I'm having. Screen 1, screen 2, screen 3. Let me go to the screen 2 now. Save and play. Now I'm entering some data. Click on what? Submit. When I click on submit, it is submitting the data and then it is navigating the user to which screen? Screen 3, that is success screen, so that the user can understand that the record is submitted successfully. Now you can go to the data source, go and refresh it once. Now the record is submitted or not? What's the record just now is submitted? Warner. What's the course name? Power BI. So now I'm entering the data into the SharePoint list from where? From Power Apps. Let me add one button here or icon which will go back to the home screen. From here I want to navigate the user to home screen. So let me add, go to the insert tab, add one icon, home icon. Let me keep the icon anywhere you want to keep. On select of this icon also will have one property called what? On select. On select of the icon, what actions I need to take? Navigate to which screen? Pass the screen name. Now save it. Public. Click on play. Click on home tab. You go to which screen? Come back to the home screen. If you want to enter another one more student details, click on what? Get started. Let me enter the data. Let's check I'm entering the name as Smith. Email ID smith12345@gmail.com. Let me enter the mobile number. Let me select the course as SQL. Educational background, let's take BTech, whatever it is. Click on what now? Submit. When I click on submit, what happens? It will submit the data and then navigate the user to which screen? Success screen. Now go and check in the data source. Let me refresh it once. The record is submitted or not? Yes. Now if you go and click on the home tab, it will go to the home button. Now we discussed about how to create an app in the Power Apps. First we discussed about what's meant by data source, and then we discussed about how to create an app in the Power Apps, and then we discussed about how to enter the data in the form. After entering the data, how to submit the data to what? Data source. Now in the data source there is some data. Still now we discussed, up to here we discussed. Whatever the data is in the data source, I want to show that data in where now? Power Apps. Now how to show the data in the Power Apps? Let me go to the Power Apps. Let me add another screen. Let me go and add one new screen, screen 4. Now in the screen 4, to show the data here, I'll go to the insert tab. Let me add one control called gallery, vertical gallery. Let me add the control gallery. Let me keep it here. And let me change the layout to title, subtitle, and body. And then let me connect this gallery to the data source. What data I want to display in this gallery? Students list data. Now go to the data source property, select the data source as what? Students. When I select, automatically it will show the data. By default is showing what here on the top? Mobile number. I don't want to show the mobile number, I want to show the student name first. So select this control. This is also a control. Select this, go here. By default is mobile. Let me change it to what? Yes, name. It is showing what? Yes, name. Let me keep it in semi bold. Increase the font size to 24. Let me select the second one. Here it is showing what? Email. I don't want to show the email. I want to show the course. What course the student is taking. Let me go and remove the email. Let me take what? Course dot value. Now it is showing what? What course the student is taking. Let me keep it as 24 itself. But let me keep it in the normal. Next here I want to show what? Let's say I want to show the mobile number of that student. Let me show the mobile number here. And let him keep it in the semi bold, increase the font size to 20. So this is what? Let me keep it in semi bold, keep it as 22. And now let me select this. This is the edit icon. Let me select the edit icon. Just increase the height of this. And then let me select the gallery. Go and add some fill color. Now how many rows, how many student details is there in the source? 3. I'm showing this data or not? Student name, course, mobile number. So mostly galleries are not used to show the complete data. So if you want to show the complete data in the gallery also you can show, but galleries are not preferred to show the complete data. Galleries are used to show the high level information. So once after showing the high level information, so if you want to view the complete data, you can select this item. Which item you are selecting? You can view that complete item details in the form again. How to do it comes in the customizations. We'll discuss them in the coming classes. So for now, try to understand what we understand still now. We discussed about when I click on get started, how to open the form, and then when I click on submit button, it will navigate the user to which screen? Success screen, and also it will submit the data to what? Data source. Whatever the data you are submitting to the data source, again I am able to display the data in the Power Apps by using one control called gallery control. Next, we need to go and work with this data. If you want to work with the data, we need to perform some lot of customizations. So I'm not able to discuss all the customizations here in today's class. We'll understand how to work with the data in the coming classes, guys. So this is all about how to create an app in Power Apps, how to go and create an app in the Power Apps. Once after creating an app, how to enter the data in the Power Apps. Once after entering the data in that app, how to submit the data to the data source. Once after submitting the data, whatever the data is there in the data source, how to go and display that data in what? Power Apps. Still now we discussed how to work with the data. You'll be covering in the coming classes, and it is an advanced topic. Fine. Now next my requirement here is we understand how to go and enter the data in the Power Apps. We understand how to submit the data. Now whenever the data comes into the data sources, which student details you are entering, I want to take that student email ID and I want to send one automated email to that student. I don't want to send the email to the student manually. Whenever the student details is inserted into the SharePoint list, automatically within the fraction of seconds, I want to send one email to that student regarding course details. Which course the student is inquired? SQL. That course details I want to send to the Smith. Smith is the student name. Now in order to go and send the emails to the students regarding the course details whenever the record is created, I don't want to do it manually. I want to send the emails to the students automatically. When I want to send it? Whenever the record is created. Now if you want to send the email to the students automatically whenever the record is created, you need to go and use which software? Power Automate, correct. So now how, with the help of Power Automate, how to send the emails to the students automatically whenever the record is created, we'll be discussing in the next class tomorrow. So in today's class we understand about what? Today is class 2. introduction to Power Apps, and also SharePoint we discussed. Next, tomorrow is class 3. In tomorrow's class, we'll discuss about what? Power Automate. How to go and use the Power Automate software to perform the automations, and what type of different types of automations we can perform. We'll be discussing in the next class. So in today's class, in this 4-step business application process, we discussed how many steps? 2 steps. One is creating an app using Power Apps. Once after creating an app, how to enter the data. Once after entering the data, how to submit that data to what? Data source. These 2 steps we discussed. Step 3, we need to discuss about what? Automation. Whenever the record data comes into the data sources, how to take that email ID and how to send an automated email to that student regarding which course he is inquired. With the help of Power Automate, we'll discuss in the next class tomorrow. Fine. Let me stop here now. Let me stop here for today. So in the next class tomorrow is class